All right, I have the privilege of being joined today by Ev Kontsevoy, one of the creators of Teleport. Ev, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
So, Ev, we have lots we could discuss. Normally we want to cover the origin story for Teleport, and I know some of it, but I would love to hear the nitty-gritty. But first, maybe you can tell us what Teleport is to give everyone context on what we're discussing.
Absolutely. So Teleport is an open source tool that engineers use to access their cloud resources. And cloud resources means SSH servers, Kubernetes clusters, databases, whatever you have inside of your cloud accounts. So it's basically a much more modern replacement for something like SSHD, but except unlike SSHD, it speaks more protocols than SSH, and it gives you a lot of this modern access practices like SSO, second factor, unified audit log, web UI, and a bunch of other things that engineers expect to have and enjoy these days.
Perfect. And you've been kind of noodling on this kind of problem space for some time. Tell us the story of how Teleport came to be, and feel free to go back as far as you'd like, because we'd love to hear your story as well.
Of course. Look, I love going back. I started my career as I was building applications that today you would call them desktop, right? You would have something like Windows NT or like some other operating system, and you would be building applications that run on a single computer. And I enjoyed it. The process was that you're sitting in front of a box, right? So you have your keyboard connected to it, and you just typing in instructions, you creating your software, and then it runs on this machine. So it's a very instant experience. So you make something and you see it live. It starts walking in front of you. It was awesome. But then we started building things to run on the internet. And if you're just starting, it feels similar. So you also have a single box, and it's somewhere in the data center. And that box, instead of throwing pixels at you, it basically has HTTP protocol that you would use to build web UI. But then as your application grows and it becomes more complex, it starts spreading, goes from one box to many boxes. And then you start using all kinds of middleware components, and you have databases and Redis cache, and then you have Elasticsearch, and then you have multiple regions and multiple cloud accounts even sometimes. So it gets crazier and crazier and crazier, and the fun of interacting with it kind of just goes away. So that's kind of on a personal level, what I've been observing with cloud computing. Meanwhile, as your application is growing to consume more and more and more of these components, how do you access those components? Like that intimacy of having a keyboard and a mouse plugged into the same machine where everything you need runs on. I call it local host experience. Local host experience is less and less relevant today. Even to build applications now, you basically need all of these cloud resources. And to recreate that intimate experience, that's really what we wanted to do with Teleport. So if you just imagine that all of these cloud accounts, all of these VPCs and availability zones and regions, all of that stuff is like one giant computer, and your internet is your, USB cable. Yeah. How can we make that experience to connecting to this one giant computer, connecting into the matrix like in the movie? That's why we built Teleport. So it's a way for engineers to have instant access to everything they have inside of their cloud accounts. And that's also why it's open source. In fact, Teleport was originally not created as a business. It was almost a side project of ours. It did not have a price tag. It did not have a commercial license. It was just a product of love that we've created because we wanted this experience to be true. But then over time, companies that figured out that the way Teleport does security, the way Teleport does access controls, it's incredibly appealing to them as well. So that's kind of how this business was born. So we started building something to make programming easier, to make building cloud applications easier, and ended up being in this security and access and compliance space. And a lot of companies now are paying us money because paradoxically, while Teleport is extremely easy to use, it also happens to be basically it's like a consolidation of industry best practices for access that you can just download and run. So that's the story.
Got it. And you you have a personal passion for this, but you didn't do it alone, right? How did the team come together to build Teleport?
So the team that built Teleport, we actually, it's our second project we're working on together. So originally we started assembling the team around 2009, 2010. So that was, we were working on a company called Mailgun. It was email delivery in the cloud. Because early clouds, they all kind of sucked. Like the first version of everything always sucks. So the EC2 and AWS in the early days, they didn't have the ability to send or receive email traffic. SMTP was blocked. So we figured we'll solve this problem for early cloud pioneers. So we built this company called Mailgun, which is still around. It's doing really, really well. So I'm very proud of that business. And then we got acquired by Rackspace, one of the cloud providers. And in the process of growing Mailgun team, so we witnessed how complex cloud environments become over time. For example, just migrating Mailgun infrastructure from one hosting provider to Rackspace took us many months. That's what complexity does for you. You can't even move around your workloads. And so the dissatisfaction with this growing complexity started there. And then once we were at Rackspace, we kept thinking about what we can do to reduce that complexity, to make applications run ideally everywhere by themselves. And it just so happens that the access problem is number one problem you need to solve if you want to enable this simple computing. I crave for simple computing in the cloud, and the team here does too.
So you're with this group doing Mailgun. You go to Rackspace, and then the band gets back together to work on something that eventually has a side project called Teleport, and Teleport takes on a life of its own.
That is pretty much true. So when we were at Rackspace, we wanted to figure out, can we make applications run in fully autonomous mode? If you picture like your laptop, right? So the laptop it's actually a very complex machine. It has a lot of complexity in it too. And it has a lot of applications. You probably have many, many millions lines of code and written all kinds of languages running on your laptop all the time. And then an interesting thing is like, you get software update. Is it Apple or Microsoft? So one of those operating system vendors, they do a software update where you get new version of everything. And all of this happens without any DevOps people, right? But if you look at this if you kind of zoom out and see what is actually going on, how is it different when Apple runs software update to Apple's versus doing a cloud deployment? It's actually pretty awesome. So they are deploying a software to millions, maybe even billions, I don't know, of servers scattered all over the world over untrusted connection, over unreliable connection. And all of this happens without DevOps people managing these boxes. That's pretty amazing. So we wanted to build a similar technology for data centers. And that project was called Gravity. And Teleport came out from that. So we wanted software to be able to run by itself without any DevOps teams globally. And in order to make it so, we realized that if you want to run it everywhere, then you need to actually enable secure connectivity to everywhere first, right? Because how it even gets there, that's the number one problem you need to address. And that's where Teleport came from. Converting, again, all of these clouds, converting these different form factors of compute into a single seamless environment. That's the first step towards it. That's what Teleport is. So you put Teleport on your infrastructure and it starts to feel like it's all in the same room with you. That's why it was called Teleport. So yeah, I encourage everyone to go and play with it. It's a single binary. You could run it as a Linux daemon. You could stick it into a Kubernetes pod. I have my own, company is paying for it, but I have a rack, half a rack of equipment in a Fremont data center here nearby. And I have another one in my house. So I have Teleport running everywhere, and it feels like I have all of the servers with me all the time. So it's pretty nice.
Now you mentioned something earlier I think we need to dig into. You said that this was a protocol-aware solution, because I think many of us have experienced, resources behind a VPN or something, and we've requested access to that VPN and thus the resource. But you're describing something different, and I'm not sure we've kind of captured the nuance here. What do you mean by protocol-aware?
Yeah, let's get technical. I love that. So if you think of what is the best way to implement access, right? So you have, let's just use like databases or SSH servers as an example. Like Teleport could support additional resources, but I like those two because we all use databases and we all use SSH. So when you try to connect into, like, let's say Postgres database, or you try to connect into a Linux box via SSH, how do you authenticate? Like, how does that machine or that box knows that you are who you claim you are? And there are basically two approaches to that. So one of them is to use some kind of shared secret. So the simplest form of it is username and password. And we all have agreed that it's basically not a good idea to use those because people tend to reuse passwords. So then most of the time today, most organizations and teams, they use a slightly more advanced version of it based on keys. So you have, public-private key, something like that. But that's still a shared secret. That's also can be stolen. So it's basically anti-pattern. Another anti-pattern that people frequently employ is reliance on perimeter security. So if you have a database, for example, and let's say it's listening on two sockets. One of them is, it could be a socket on localhost, or it could be a local network. So if you connect into a local network, like there is no password, there is no encryption. Why? Because I'm on my own VPC. Like I trust everyone who's on the same VPC. So that's what zero trust movement was. The purpose of that movement is to eliminate that. You should not be relying on perimeter security, and every resource needs to think that I'm on a public internet. Anyone can try to connect. So that's another thing that people oftentimes rely on is perimeter security. And a third solution to access is organizations now realizing, well, we have a lot of servers, we have a lot of databases, we have a lot of apps and environments, and we have these teams that are distributed. We should just cut access to as many people as possible. Like no access is the new default. So in combination of those three things, shared credentials, perimeter security, and bureaucracy, that's really what it is. That's the state of access in most organizations. So not only it pisses people off, but it's also not awfully secure, because I can look into an organization like those 5 people are allowed to access to production. All right, they're going to hack into their laptops, get their keys, and then they get access to everything. So that is what Teleport solves. Teleport basically says, no form of shared credentials ever. Instead, Teleport relies on your identity that you have within the company. So when you show up for work and you authenticate via something like Active Directory, or some organizations use Google Apps, and smaller teams might be happy with just GitHub, right? You go authenticate against GitHub and you have that credential. So Teleport brings this down to the protocol level. What it means is that you try to use a command line like pSQL, or you try to type SSH, or kubectl if you're using Kubernetes. So once you try to run these commands, Teleport will check if you authenticated against your identity for your company. If you're not, then it will ask you go and do the SSO dance with multi-factor and all of that. But then once you're authenticated, Teleport will create a certificate. We believe that only certificate-based access should be allowed. And we implement certificate-based authentication and authorization, and we can talk about difference on a protocol level. So then we bake you a certificate for SSH, and that's how you access SSH machines. And then we make you a certificate for Kubernetes for database, and that's how you access those. And the difference between a certificate and a shared credentials is very simple. Certificate is unique to you. So the resource you're accessing, like server, for example, it will know that you're Eric, you're not Ev. You're not hiding behind some kind of alias like admin or a dev, because a lot of these shared credentials, they share it for a reason. Like They have very generic names, and which allows these resources to make decisions to grant or deny certain actions to you based on who you are. So that means your authorization is now based on identity as well. And it also allows you to have extremely detailed audit. For example, when you try to run a sudo command in the middle of a SSH session, Teleport might actually say, you know what, you need additional permissions for that. So that capability was not even possible before. Or if you're trying to drop a SQL table, another obviously dangerous operation. You gotta use your YubiKey one more time just because you're about to drop a SQL table. That's what Teleport enables. It's basically extremely easy to use thing. You don't have to change anything, but you're getting the state of the art access technology for all protocols that we support. And that is how Teleport is fundamentally different from anything else that's out there.
Thank you for clarifying the nuance. What these are good examples, the sudo command, dropping the SQL table. Do users then kind of specify the things that they think are sensitive? Does Teleport just kind of come out of the box with we know dropping SQL is probably something you want to care about? How does someone tell Teleport this is the stuff that needs approval for and who to go to approval for?
Well, that's software engineers do. So when you design your stack and you decide, okay, we're going to be using Linux, then we're going to put Kubernetes on top, then we're going to use Postgres, for example. So all of these things you need to decide ahead of time what is privileged operation, what is not privileged operation. So then you have to rely on something that we've all been familiar for, like role-based access control. You have to say, okay, so I need to have roles that are privileged or not privileged, and then you need to assign these roles to people in your organization. And you can do that using even GitHub. In GitHub, you can create teams, basically creating groups. And for different groups, then you can define permissions. So to create groups, you use identity management. Like I already said, Active Directory, Google Apps, GitHub, whatever allows you to create teams and groups of engineers and assign memberships. But then in Teleport, you then go take these groups and you specify which actions are allowed or not allowed for these groups for individual resources that Teleport supports. And then what Teleport will do, as I already said, so we will enforce certificate-based access, but we will also utilize native access controls of that particular resource. So it basically means that's what we put into that phrase that I often use, that we bring identity down to protocol level. Means that your group memberships from Active Directory will go all the way on the wire, all the way to database. And database will see, oh, you're a member of a different group and you're getting access denied. But if you want to insist that I need to have access, maybe because there's this mission critical ticket that I need to troubleshoot, then you can request access right there in the middle of a session, and your team will be able to approve or deny you access, like using something like Slack, which means that your permissions will be elevated temporarily just to do one privileged operation and then dropped back to the original level. This is why Teleport is so much better than relying on this bureaucracy where no access means no access. Simply because we realize that the world is extremely dynamic, and you have to be using modern access solution that gives you exact same ability to grant or deny access.
Got it. So I show up to work, I request access to do my common development, and I Teleport News discovers who I am. It tells the database who I am, and I'm off to the races. And then as soon as I want to drop a SQL table, it's going to intercept that command and be like, whoa, you need elevated permissions.
Correct.
Do you want to request those?
I do want to make one correction.
Okay,
in the beginning, you said, I show up for work and I request access to what I need. Actually, no, things that you need access every day, by default, you have access as long as you authorize with your identity provider. Because it's extremely important for your access solution to be convenient. If you force engineers to be inconvenienced by it, you're causing all kinds of problems. Obviously, people become less productive, but those who are a little bit more adventurous and energetic, they will build backdoors into your own infrastructure. It's really hard to make all of you engineers to use archaic, so to speak, or inconvenient access methods. They will just inject SSHD into their own stack and they'll create their own socket. You won't even know about it.
So for my standing permissions to run queries against the test database, I don't need to request anything special. But as soon as I want to run queries against production or I want to tear down that test database, it's going to intercept my command, tell me I need elevated privileges, and give me a path to request those in Slack
Very
or something.
much so.
Got it.
So we try to resolve this conflict that exists across many organizations, security versus productivity. So we believe we found a way to deliver amazing security and a lot of compliance controls as well, without pissing off engineers, without sacrificing any of productivity benefits. In fact, I would even argue that if you're using Teleport, you're way more productive than if you're using like standard open source tools that come with, Kubernetes has its own kind of access layer, and the SSHD is on every server. So to start using those, you need to be creating like jump hosts and proxies and like how to configure these like IP addresses to be discoverable. So with Teleport, the way it's architected, we can give you access to anything, anywhere without VPNs. So we're going to take a look into documentation how to do it. But spoiler alert, it's based on reverse tunnels. So every resource can be connected to a Teleport proxy via a resource, via reverse tunnel, which means that you can connect to things running behind NAT on someone else's infrastructure with Teleport, like into like a self-driving vehicle or some IoT drone flying around. So all of these capabilities are going to only contribute to how productive you could be if you use Teleport for access.
Got it. Now take us back to the narrative, if you will. Now that we kind of understand how this all works, so you're building this autonomous deployment platform you discussed earlier, and release Teleport kind of on the side, but we mentioned that it kind of took on a life of its own. What did that look like from like the creator's point of view? How do you see that there's activity around Teleport that's picking up?
Yeah, there was really confusion is the word. So we initially, I do remember I took a call with a very early open source user who wanted to run Teleport on smart collars, that you put on cows. And it was funny to me because we always talk about let's treat servers like we treat cattle, like as opposed to pets. And here we go, like the actual person who's running code deployments into cows. And I think the interesting thing was that someone offered us money before we even wanted Teleport to be a product. I think someone reached out and said, well, do you have a license? Because we want to be using it in a mission critical deployment and we want to have relationship with the vendor. But we continued not to take Teleport too seriously simply because it's lightweight, it's not particularly expensive, and we had this other product that we were selling at the time called Gravity. So Gravity was this kind of autonomous Kubernetes cluster technology. It's also open source, it's also out there, but we don't actively develop and evolve this anymore. So that was quite unexpected. And then I was shocked by how mature companies were. They were reaching out to us and asking questions about Teleport. Because normally what you would expect if you have a project like this on GitHub is, home lab people would reach out and say, hey, I have my VMware in the basement, or I have OpenStack cluster on a bunch of Raspberry Pis and I'm tinkering with Teleport. I expected that. But we had people like stock exchanges or Silicon Valley companies who just raised a series of funding, or companies that are preparing to go IPO. They started reaching out to us and saying that we actually have Teleport in open source version and we would love to use it in production if only we had additional capabilities or integrations. So that was, it wasn't sudden. I don't think it ever is, but Like I would say in a matter of like 6 to 9 months, it became pretty clear that we have something that the world desperately needs.
Got it. And then you started putting some more attention on Teleport. It sounds like it's been a busy kind of year for the project. What's been going on?
So yes, like at the end of last year, right before COVID hit, actually that would be a year before, at the end of 2019, it became absolutely clear that that Teleport solves a really, really big problem that a lot of people are experiencing like day to day. And we need to focus companies' attention on Teleport simply because opportunity is so huge. Like mark my words, I don't believe that 5 years from now, it will be the norm for companies to manage access for every single protocol, for every single layer in their stack. Like it's going to go away. Like the way you're accessing databases, Kubernetes clusters, even internal web apps or SSH server is going to be through same proxy. That needs to be identity aware. That is what we believe will be true. So, and if everyone will be using it, and if we are the best solution out there, so we need to focus on it and completely own the space. That's what we've decided. And since we've migrated all of our engineering efforts from our previous project to Teleport, we nearly doubled the size of product in less than a year. So we originally only supported 2 protocols, SSH and Kubernetes API. Because accessing Kubernetes is the exact same problem that with SSH. You have many clusters and they have different permissions, and how do you make sure it's all synchronized and so on and so forth. So we added support for 2 databases in just a few months, Postgres and MySQL. We're rolling out MongoDB support soon. We've added support for HTTPS, meaning that if you have your internal web app, something like Jenkins or Grafana dashboard, and you have plenty of those sprinkled all over your infrastructure. So how do you centralize access to all of these internal web apps without having to expose every single one with, load balancer, X509 certificate, public IP, and so on and so forth. So all of that was launched in the last few months. So it's extremely exciting. So the product is growing very, very quickly. And but there are, again, plenty to do. There are so many different things people run inside of their VPCs and cloud accounts. And once you experience Teleport for SSH, you want it for everything else you want that you're using. So we need to build more, build faster, without sacrificing quality.
Yeah, and tell us about the Teleport community. I mean, you've got this strong team building a bunch of product, and I'm impressed at the GitHub stars, which is just one metric, but there's like a lot of people have discovered this thing and seem excited about it. But at the same time, there's not a lot of like if I want to go hang out with the Teleport community, that's still in its infancy. It sounds like.
Guilty as charged. Absolutely. So I think it maybe has to do with DNA or personalities of like the founding engineers on a project, right? So if you go and do git log on Teleport source code and you start looking at the first 3 contributors, like people who like our CTO Sasha and a couple of other engineers, they're not particularly visible out there. Some of them actually extremely pro privacy. We as a company, we're like in the early days particularly, we were extremely introverted in a way that most people here, but like most Teleport contributors prefer to be coding as opposed to be visible at conferences or on IRC or on Twitter or something like this. So this is slowly changing. So we just recently launched public Slack channel for Teleport users, and it instantly got like hundreds of people. Like they showed up out of nowhere. I don't even know how they discovered. I think it's because we added a Slack channel to the README that's on GitHub. I don't even think we have it on our website. So we're slowly learning how to be more, how to enable community to exist, how to kind of build this relationship. So we need to rapidly get better, because even companies that pay us money, like enterprise users, they have support, they have account managers, they enjoy amazing treatment by Teleport team, but they still want to interact. with the community. Maybe for variety of, like, that's why communities are called communities. It's just a place for people who have something in common, like to hang out and have a good time. So we need to absolutely be better at building our community and interacting with it.
And what's the future hold for Teleport from here? Having kind of heard the story and about this big year, what gets you excited about the next year or two of Teleport?
So one interesting thing is that we will go back to our roots a little bit. Remember, I started my career as building desktop software for Windows. So, and apparently east of Silicon Valley, half the world runs on Windows. So Windows support for protocols like RDP. It's on a near roadmap. So this is something we're actively working on. So then we get a lot of requests from users to support more and more database types. Because on one hand, data is why we actually do computing. It's the most valuable thing. Like, that's really what computers do. They transform one data set into another. And companies these days, they have a variety of databases in different locations. So if you want to make sense of this data, you have to have convenient access to it. Because if everyone in the organization is getting access denied to all the valuable data you've collected, then what's the point then? So that's another obvious vector for Teleport to be evolving. And I also believe that we could always, if we just remember where it all came out of, the frustration with complexity, I want Teleport to continue to be simpler and easier to get started with. So basically user experience and making it appealing, not just to, security professionals or very experienced DevOps people. Like, I want a 14-year-old to be enjoying Teleport. Like, you get yourself your first DigitalOcean account when you try to get into cloud computing. Teleport should be obvious way how you access everything that's inside, instead of you building your own kind of jump host following tutorials where you don't even understand what you're copy pasting. That's what the future holds, the near future holds for Teleport and the team.
And then the community sounds like that will be turning a corner here as well. So you've got the Slack channel live, and you'll be doing further engagement there. And I'm imagining, like, for listeners who a few of them love Teleport and want to meet each other, and then for those who don't want to kind of jump in, the Slack channel is kind of the place to go for now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best place to start tinkering with Teleport and understanding how it works is probably go to GitHub page. If you could Google like GitHub Teleport SSH, and on these keywords you'll find it. Or you can just go to goteleport.com, and from there you can go to the open source area.
And what's the state of outside contributors? Is there a place for that here?
Absolutely. So it's having a project in the open is quite a responsibility, because on one hand, you need to make sure that only quality contributions get in. Because look, it's a security product. If someone is using Teleport, that basically controls access to everything you have. So the security angle and just overall kind of level, like the weight of this responsibility is enormous. But on the other hand, you want to be nice to people. Like, we've had examples where college students that are working on a project, for example, learning something, like they would send us a contribution. So they don't want to be discouraged. I want people to be excited about programming, first of all, but also be excited about participating. But at the same time, it's unrealistic for a college student to just expect them to have top quality contribution into a project like Teleport. So working with contributors, working with them on improving quality of the pull requests, it's extremely important. So we try to balance all of these considerations, and it's not always easy. Sometimes people not aware that having a popular open source project out there creates this tension, but it's unavoidable and it's a sign of something good. So you just have to be very pragmatic and just be nice to people when you go through this.
And it sounds like your approach isn't to just kind of ignore outside contributions. It's to engage with those contributions as they come in and improve them to the point where they're ready to go in the project.
Yes. I do believe that like one of backends that Teleport supports for storing audit for MongoDB, I believe came from the community, that we had to go back and forth to make sure that like the kind of compliance and security constraints that we have, they're still addressed. So we also learning how to get better at it. It's a balancing act.
Fantastic. Well, you've done great so far. I have all the confidence you'll continue to navigate the balance.
Well, we will do our best.
Ev, thanks for coming today. Anything we didn't cover that we should have?
No, looks like we've. I like the fact that we talked about technology, and I like the fact that we talked about like the reasons why we created this project. So those are my two favorite topics to talk about.
Okay, go find Ev on Slack and GitHub, and we'll catch up with you later.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
You can find today's show notes and past episodes at contributor.fyi. Until next time, I'm Eric Anderson, and this has been Contributor.